All right, everyone. This is episode 20 of Up in Your Business. And we're here today with the one and only Lawrence Wilson. Larry Wilson is the founder and managing director of the Wilson Organization, which is a multidisciplinary firm that focuses on leadership development, coaching, management, training, and a few other things that he can divulge into further. But Larry, it's great to have you here in the studio today.
Well, it's my honor, actually, to be here with the two mics.
It's been a while.
Yes, and I'm speaking into a mic. I'm mic'd all over the place.
I know.
Mics everywhere.
I'm glad we finally got this set up.
Let me just say, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
I think the world of you and Focus Forward Media. I think you're doing great things, and you will do even greater things. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. Just to give the audience a little context here, we first met Larry a little bit over a year ago when we moved into our first office in Providence, and Larry was 2 doors down from us, and so we quickly got acquainted and developed a friendship that has lasted through thick and thin.
That's
and
right.
Here we still are dealing with you again.
Absolutely.
All right. So my first question is just briefly tell us a little bit, where did you grow up and when did you first get into business? And
Two very different questions, actually. When people ask me, am I a native Rhode Islander?
mm-hmm.
I always say almost, because I grew up in Mystic, Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I suppose that might mean that I know all the bars and beaches of South County.
Yeah.
But the reality is that my family is the oldest African-American and Native American family in that part of southern New England. And we're very proud of that, actually. Went off to college in New Jersey, Drew University, small liberal arts college, and then majored in economics and music. Music was my passion. Economics was what I had to major in so my father could be sure that I would get a job when I got out.
Yeah. You still dabble in music.
I still write music. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
But from there, I went on to the Wharton School. I was actually accepted at 3 different schools, very different. Hart School of Music, Yale School of Divinity, and the Wharton School.
Only for the finest people.
And I went there about 4 years after Donald Trump was there.
Oh, he went
But
there.
he was in the undergraduate school.
So you're smarter.
Yes.
I would say so. I would say so.
I don't think it would take much, but do go on.
Yes. So what were some of the jobs you had growing up and into your 20s and 30s?
The first job I ever had, I was the custodian, the assistant custodian at my church in Mystic, Union Baptist Church. I was not good at it, but I was following in the footsteps of my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather, who took great pride. That was always a second job for each of them.
They all worked there.
And they took great pride in the fact that they were so devoted to their church.
Yeah.
But I wasn't cut from that piece of cloth.
Yeah.
And so the next job was at the Hartford National Bank in downtown Mystic,
Mm-hmm.
which has been since many years ago sucked up by the Bank of America
Oh, wow.
consortium of banks, if you will. But yes, it was Hartford National Bank, and I was a coin roller. What does that mean?
That was a job?
Yeah, you take a bag of loose coins, throw them into a machine,
And you just put them into
and
the...
it would put them in these wrappers. Well,
Wow.
the very first day I was there, I dropped $100 in dimes down the cellar stairs. I still go back to Connecticut on weekends to pick them up.
Did you get yelled at by the boss?
I think they felt sorry for me. I think they thought this kid is obviously handicapped in some way.
First day on the job.
That's right.
Oh, that's funny. How old were you at that point?
16, 17.
16, okay.
Yeah.
And then, so talk a little bit about the jobs you got into later on that, we've talked about over the years.
They actually, the bank was actually disappointed because I stayed there. That was my summer job for the 6 years in college and in graduate school. And their hope was that they would put me into the management training program, which they did, and that I would become a banker and grow through the ranks of Hartford National. And I really appreciated the fact that they had so much faith in me. But the fact of the matter was that once I graduated from the Wharton School, there were other opportunities, and I decided to take one of those. And that job was at Philip Morris, the tobacco company in Manhattan. I worked there for 10 years, lived in New York, or lived around New York for those 10 years.
What part of New York did you live in?
In Manhattan,
Nice.
first on the Upper East Side, then eventually over on the West Side, and then down in the West Village.
What was it like back then? Because, I mean, now, if people who think about the Upper East Side is like, talk about money. It takes a lot of money to live there.
All right, I'm going to date myself. But it was a lot of money back in those days.
Sure.
My rent it was a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan.
Yeah.
With a step-down living room, though, so it had some style to it. But
Oh,
it
cool.
was
Any shag carpets? Shag rug?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it did. There's a whole story that goes with that. We could be here forever. But the fact of the matter was I paid $295 a month when I first moved in, and it rose to $325. And then eventually it wanted to rise to $350, and I thought, well, that's astronomical. So
my God.
I'm going to buy a house in Connecticut. But I could have, at the time I left that apartment, I could have bought that apartment in 1980 for $28,000.
Oh,
The one in New York?
The one in Manhattan. That apartment would be worth well over $1 million today.
Yeah.
you could be a millionaire.
I know. But guys, you can't live life
I know,
like
I
that.
know.
You really can't. The woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
make decisions at the time with the
course.
best information that we've got.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
You know, but that's interesting. Only $300 a month. But that was a lot.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
And
what was
and
it,
instead of doing that, I bought a home in Rowayton, Connecticut, which is a part of the city of Norwalk.
Yeah.
An hour from the city, so I commuted in the city for a number of years on the Metro North train. So I know that whole commute with the weather problems and the mechanical difficulties and all of that. But I bought a house for $97,000 in 1980, and I sold it in 1985 and put a cool $100,000 in profit in my pocket.
Nice. That's great. And what was a typical pay back then, in relation, because, you say $300 a month was a lot for rent. Like, what was average pay?
Well, that's
Or I guess what were you getting paid at the time?
that's a good question, because it was the folks at Philip Morris, when I first moved in there in 1975, they were the ones that said, this is how much you can afford based on your salary in terms of an apartment. Mm-hmm. You should not go over $300 a month. Mm-hmm. So I came in at $295. Why? Because my starting salary coming out of Wharton, and frankly, Wharton would garner, better salaries for their graduates than perhaps some other business schools,
yeah.
or certainly in another profession.
Yeah.
But that salary was $18,000.
Okay.
And
So $1,000 a month.
$18,000, and that was considered very good money. And to give you a kind of perspective on that, and I really have empathy for this now. I can really understand this. My dad was a machinist at a small factory in Connecticut, Davis Standard. He went off to trade school to prepare for that job. He taught that factory how to enter into the extrusion business. To this day, I'm still not sure what extrusion is. But my dad learned that in trade school. So he stayed there, and he worked his way up from a machinist to a foreman, to a production supervisor, and those kinds of jobs. But essentially, when I came out of Wharton at $18,000, my father had worked there at that company for 30 years at that point, and he was making exactly the same amount.
Wow.
Whoa. Yeah. That's crazy.
And, you have to, today, because I'm 68 years old, so I'm older than he was at the time, but not that much older. He was in his 50s. He was starting to look at retirement and whatnot. I have empathy for the fact that a man could work all of his life, and get paid a salary that was considered a decent wage, but not a great one.
Right.
But then have his son come out
and make the same
money.
Yeah, that's
But I'm
crazy.
sure there was some type of pride there, being a father and
Yeah,
seeing
definitely.
your son come out
Michael,
and do
that's a
this.
very good point, because I'm going to tell you, my parents were not able to finance my education by any means
Yeah.
in terms of dollars and cents, but I have always said that my parents financed me and who I am as a person and whatever success I have enjoyed in school and then beyond school through their love for me
Yeah.
and their commitment to me. You
Yeah.
know,
I got a question
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
Philip Morris.
Yeah.
So when you first got brought on, how did you make that connection? How did they find you, or how did you find them, and what were you doing for them? And what is Philip Morris for those who don't know?
Yeah.
that's true.
That's a good question.
That's true. Philip Morris is one of the largest. It was at the time when I was there the largest tobacco company in the world. They were the manufacturers of Marlboro. They still are. Philip Morris USA still exists in Richmond, Virginia. The corporation has changed its name in New York from Philip Morris to Altria. But one of the divisions, they're essentially a food conglomerate, but one of the divisions still is Philip Morris USA. So they made Marlboro cigarettes, they made Virginia Slims, Benson and Hedges, all of the big name cigarette products. I started in corporate affairs, corporate relations, as part of the staff that supported their philanthropy. They sponsored art shows, for example. They did a lot of goodwill. When you make a cigarette product, that is not a popular product among people, and at the same time, they couldn't advertise on television. Back in those days, we could still be in magazines, we could still be on billboards. They can't do any of that now. Wow. But promotion programs like the Virginia Slims tennis circuit or the Marlboro Cup horse race brought visibility to the products. I ended up doing some of that work, but in the beginning, I ended up as brand manager of Benson and Hedges and Virginia Slim cigarettes. But in the beginning, I worked in that promotion department, and they were into the arts. And the way they found me was because the Wharton School had sponsored an art convocation. It was after graduation. They were promoting the whole concept of business supporting the arts. And so various corporations were at Wharton for talks, and it was a symposium. I was one of the presenters. My thesis had to do with business support of the arts. And so I spoke. A Philip Morris representative, a vice president from Philip Morris, Frank Saunders, was in the audience. He and I began talking afterward, and he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I've got a passion for the arts, with a music degree and whatnot. He said, come and join our ranks in the art philanthropic work that we do. Yeah. And so I did that. And I met some wonderful people, doing those kinds of promotions. I flew with Arthur Ashe,
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who that is?
I don't know who that is.
I don't know what that is either.
First African-American professional, highly successful tennis player.
You flew with them?
Yeah, on the company jet.
Nice.
They would send me out to pick up people.
Were you starstruck, or how'd you handle it?
Yeah,
First
kind
big
of.
star.
Eugene Ormandy was the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra. I mean, the list goes. Lady Bird Johnson. Now who is she?
I don't know. You tell me.
President's wife.
Thank you.
Oh, how'd you know that?
Lyndon Johnson.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. But anyway, so I had that kind of exposure. And
First lady, not president's wife. She's the first lady.
Yeah,
well, she was the
I'll
first
show
lady
some respect.
under Lyndon Johnson.
former first lady. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Good.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. So I mean, so that was the kind of work I did at Philip Morris. I became a smoking and health spokesman for the company.
Smoking is real healthy.
Television interviews and radio.
Yeah, we saw a few of your TV commercials there that you starred in.
Yes, well.
Big actor. And so what did you do next after that?
I stayed there 10 years. And like young people today, after a while you get to a point where you want to try something different.
Yeah, of course.
And I think by that time I was kind of saturated with the whole smoking and health issue, and could no longer justify
Yeah.
the harm that it could do to you.
Right.
Because you have morals.
Yes,
Right, yeah.
and I have values,
Yeah.
and when you start having nightmares about it,
Yeah.
then it's time to go.
It's definitely not easy.
Yeah. And in the beginning, how did I justify it? Well, I was learning a lot. And I think in the beginning, I really did believe that there was still some question about the link between smoking and some of the diseases, for example. But by the end, I was,
It's over.
that couldn't be dispelled. So I left, went to work for a rather small but nicely positioned consulting firm. And actually, that's where I got the experience to design and fuel the consulting firm I have today, the Wilson Organization.
Yeah.
But Ted Gordon had started a company called the Futures Group in outside of Hartford, Connecticut, in Glastonbury. And it was a strategic forecasting and planning firm. And it had some good, strong clients. Miller Brewing Company.
Yeah.
It did work for the government. USAID. What's USAID, gentlemen?
You tell me.
Yeah, I have no idea.
No, it's not. You tell me. You want to take a guess as well?
USAID.
USAID.
Wait. Let me guess.
United States of
Is it
Agriculture.
Okay.
I'm gonna seem like the biggest
No.
idiot right here.
Let me. USAID. United States of America.
The sun is going down. Okay. Let's let me just
spoil
say
it. Spoil it.
It's the United States Agency for International Development,
I never would have guessed that.
and that essentially is an agency that goes into developing countries, and tries to spread goodwill, tries to put programming in place that can be beneficial to the residents there, the people there, the culture there. And so they had asked me specifically as a marketing guy. I majored in marketing at the Wharton School. So as a marketing guy, they asked me to design a contraceptive marketing program for the women of Liberia. And I did.
Did you travel to Liberia?
Yes, it had to be tested.
Wow.
So I flew to Liberia, and at that time,
It's a long flight.
the government was under siege. And there was a coup d'etat while I was there.
Really?
And I was supposed to stay, I think, for something like 6 to 10 weeks. And after
Jeez.
like the second week, in the middle of the night, with rifles and bayonets
Oh my
and
God.
fatigues on, they
Attacks.
woke me up in my room and said, "Get dressed right now.
Oh my God.
Leave your stuff behind. You're going to the airport, and you're going to get out of this country."
Wow.
And
That's wild.
there were Canadians, British, and Americans on the plane, and probably some other countries too.
Yeah.
But they essentially took us away on a 747.
It was that bad, huh?
It was that bad.
Wow.
Is that scary?
And pulling into the airport, the car stopped, the windows were open, and bayonets were pointed right at our
At the car.
at our necks, actually.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we were approved to leave. That was my experience there. These are all experiences, though, that
That's insane.
you don't forget.
Yeah.
Right? They add to who you are,
That's for sure.
Another great learning opportunity I had as a marketing guy, particularly, was doing some market research and whatnot as a consultant to Procter & Gamble.
Yeah.
I began talking with General Motors, and we won't go into the specifics of how that happened, but essentially I joined their ranks in their dealer development program to become a General Motors Chevrolet dealer.
L.E. Wilson Chevrolet.
L.E. Wilson Chevrolet in beautiful downtown Mansfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
We were in business for several years, but it was at a time in the late 80s and early 90s when General Motors was looking to remove from their dealer network the mom and pop operations, the small operations, that they were known for, that quality service, that individualized
Yeah.
attention and whatnot. And they were looking for what we call today mega dealers.
Yeah.
You know, somebody that could sell a Ford as well as they sold a Chevrolet, as well as they sold a Toyota.
Yeah.
You know, on the Miracle Mile up in Norwood and whatnot.
They just wanted volume.
That's what all of those volume-oriented dealers do.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, Wilson Chevrolet closed because General Motors, I had put up some money, and General Motors was my partner, and they had the majority interest.
So did they like buy you out, or did they shut you down and just say goodbye?
Yes, I got
Money.
most of well, at least some of my money back.
Could you see it coming, or were you blindsided?
No, as a matter of fact, I got a phone call the night we were having a Christmas party in the dealership.
Oh no!
And I had to go down and announce that to the. Yeah, it was a terrible.
And how
experience.
soon was it? Like when they called, did they say 3 weeks, a month, a week, tomorrow?
Well, you know what, Michael? I'm not sure that I remember
Okay.
specifically.
Yeah.
It was probably a few weeks. It couldn't have been much more. I stayed on to close things down, but it couldn't have been much more than that for the workers because they had to find other jobs, and of course they were so dispirited at that point.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't expect them to do.
That's crazy.
And it's too bad. We were selling about 60 cars a month, and we were growing in size, and
pretty good.
the goal was 90. But they just decided, and we were not the only ones that they took out of business.
Yeah.
I think if I had the experience and the wisdom that I have now, I would have fought that harder, and I think I could have won. You know, but General Motors is General Motors.
Right.
You can't fight those big companies.
And it's like the IRS.
Yeah. What they say goes.
That's exactly right. So they wanted the point closed, and the leverage they used was I didn't think we would be getting into all of this, gentlemen, but the leverage they used was, if you leave now, we will give you most of your money back. If you don't leave, you will get none of it back, and if you fail, you're completely on your own.
Okay.
You know, and they did really have a substantial interest in the dealership. I would have had to raise an awful lot of money through banks and whatnot, and been on the hook for that. But really, what happened was I began to transition to the not-for-profit sector. I became interested in colleges and universities, but the first college that I worked for was a for-profit school. Now, most people don't know that about the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. But it's a for-profit school, and they hired me because of my marketing background to essentially be marketing director. Now, marketing director meant admissions director. And the school at the time, this was in 1993, was suffering with some degree of a declining enrollment. And so they wanted me to turn that around. And we did. I hired some good people around me. We turned it around. And in the 6 or 7 years that I was there, we made it the largest independent art and design college in the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's big now.
It's very big.
It's a big school.
It's very big.
So you still get your footprint on there, kind of.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is to, create that team that is going to rely on? Like, you can ask them to do anything.
Michael, that's an excellent question. And I can give you an example of the school, using the School of Visual Arts as an institution where the team really worked.
Yeah.
I can give you another example of where I wasn't allowed to bring in another team, my own team. And if you can't bring in your own team, and you're sort of, to excuse my French, but if you're stuck with some of the people that are already there, you're also stuck with their attitude.
Yep.
Yeah.
They can have bitterness toward you. There was one job I had. There was a team of folks that I inherited, one or two individuals particularly, who had wanted my job and didn't get it. Now you can imagine, now you're working for a boss, who is dependent upon, I was dependent upon them because they had a sense of history in that particular field and whatnot.
Yeah. But they were now working for a guy whose position they wanted.
They wanted, and so therefore It was their mandate, their objective to undo me. Now, I'm not going to say that they succeeded completely. It became a bit more complex than that.
Sure.
But also makes your job a lot complex,
Yeah.
a lot more
But
complex.
what it does, guys, is it leaves you with the inability to trust.
Right.
And if you think about,
Definitely.
I don't care what your job is these days. I don't care what field it's in. I don't care what level it's at. If you're going to be a good leader, you've got to be able to inspire trust from your people and receive it.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
as much as I tried to inspire it, I was not receiving it.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Through these jobs, throughout all these years, what were you think some of the key lessons you learned that kind of helped you like build your company now and have helped you grow as a person and as a business?
Well, we have to qualify that, don't we? Because what you learn, and the messages that you walk away with as a result of a job really does depend upon that institution, doesn't it? The easy answer is that the larger companies really taught me professionalism. Okay? Really
How to act,
It really taught me how to handle people, how to deal with people.
Sure.
It really taught me how to develop a value system that could be applicable to a wide array of people.
Yeah.
A really diverse population.
Mm-hmm.
But let me also say that even the smaller companies and organizations and the not-for-profit organizations did the same thing. Essentially, all of those experiences, all of those different venues, all of those different companies come together to teach you how to be yourself.
Yeah.
And how to be yourself in a positive way that you might be a role model for somebody behind you. All of that experience teaches you essentially how to mentor some folks. It teaches you what's important and what isn't.
Yeah.
And most importantly, it teaches you how to deal and how to be authentic with people of different backgrounds, of different cultures, of different races, of different sexual identities, of different genders, all of that. We call that today, of course, diversity, and that seems to be a real buzzword. Diversity and inclusion. And what's inclusion? If diversity is a range of cultures and a range of people of different histories and a range of orientations, inclusion is what? Inclusion is involvement and it is empowerment. And you need both to make a person or help a person feel included in an organization.
Sure.
So fast forward on some of these companies I worked for, went to the School of Visual Arts. After the School of Visual Arts, I returned home to work for my Indian tribe, Native Americans in Connecticut, the Eastern Pequots. There are two bands of Pequots in Connecticut.
Yep.
One is the federally recognized band called Mashantucket Pequot that owns Foxwoods.
I was just going to say that.
The other is my tribe, the sister tribe, cousins to the Mashantuckets, direct cousins, but we're not recognized, and so we don't have the benefit of that kind of economic development.
Does that mean you don't, like, I know, like the reservations, you have reservations down there?
We have
though you're
our
not
reservation. Our reservation is 350, almost 400 years old.
Okay.
And it's adjacent to the reservation that Foxwoods is built on, because that was the other Pequot tribe's reservation. We can talk about what I did with them a little later on, but the reality is that I was dealing with Native people. I am part of them.
Yeah.
Right. From there, did some more Native American work with a museum that was built down there by by the folks at Foxwoods. They're by the Mashantucket Pequot.
I went there on a school trip.
And yes,
Pequot Museum.
right. And I could give you a test right now, except I wouldn't want to embarrass you.
I don't. I wouldn't remember it.
The fact of the matter, from there, I went to Los Angeles, and there's
My favorite place.
I suppose there's rhyme and reason to how I made some of these jumps, but I went to Los Angeles to become Chief Development Officer or Vice President of Development for the Japanese American National Museum, another whole culture of people that were focused on honoring, memorializing the people that suffered in the internment camps in World War II. So that's a whole different culture. From there came back and went to work for University of Hartford and then Hartford Seminary, as a part of that experience. And then finally to the American Baptist Foundation, where I was named president. American Baptist Churches is a Protestant organization, right? Headquartered at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, but that's a religious community, just like the Methodists are, just like the Catholics are, just like the Buddhists are, just like the Muslims are. But I went to work for them. What am I saying? I'm saying that all of these cultural or religious differences, right, taught me about the melting pot called America.
Yeah.
And that everybody in that melting pot has something to say, something to be valued, and something to contribute. That's what diversity is about today. And we find the companies that call up the Wilson organization and say, can you help us increase our numbers in terms of diverse populations?
Yeah.
They're doing that because they recognize that there's a need for their employee base and their customer base to mirror each other,
Yeah. So, question, as someone who is African American and Native American, and now you kind of work with diversity, I'm sure that in the past you have run into diversity issues, no?
More than just run into them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 68 years old, and I would say for all 68 years, I or my parents before me were confronted on a very regular basis with issues that related to our race, that related to our ethnicity,
Mm-hmm.
that related to our cultural past. And that's the way it would be for any minority group in the country. And quite frankly, every group in America, with the exception of the English and the Dutch, were brought here or came here, as a subculture, and were discriminated against. And that's what we're seeing alive and well at the borders now, which is so sad and sickening, really. Quick story. I was working at the School of Visual Arts in 1997, and my father, literally on his deathbed, said to me, 2 things I want for you. One is, I want you to keep your weight down and take care of your body, because he died of diabetes. He said I was too heavy. He was too heavy for too many years, and it got the best. He lost limbs and whatnot. The second thing is, I want you to finish up your work in New York City as quickly as you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for you to come home to help your people. And by that he meant come home to help the Indian tribe achieve federal recognition like so many tribes have been able to do across the country. Shouldn't say so many. Gotcha. There's still a good 250 to 300 tribes that are not recognized by the federal government and are legitimate tribes.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why your particular tribe wasn't recognized?
That's a good question.
That's, I guess, what I'm talking about. First of all, the recognition process is a very cumbersome one. It takes a lot of money, And so in order, from my father's lips to God's ears, because 3 months after he died, the tribe called me and said, we need your leadership. Would you come home and help us with recognition? So I came home as their CEO. But before I could kind of pick up that mantle, I needed to raise some money. I needed to raise money to hire historians, anthropologists, genealogists, lawyers to lobby, and to pay myself as well as a small staff at the tribal office.
Yeah.
So we raised. I led a team that raised $3.5 million initially, and eventually raised another $14 million.
Wow.
To get the job done, and boys, we prevailed.
Oh, yup.
You got recognition?
We got recognition.
That's awesome.
Only to be the only tribe in the United States to have that recognition reversed.
What?
And it was reversed for racial reasons.
Really?
Absolutely. Racial reasons, and to some extent economic reasons as well. Now people will deny this and deny that. And, no, it's because the people of Connecticut didn't want a third casino in Connecticut. It had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I tell you this story in the context of diversity because this was a diversity issue.
Yeah, of course.
Because we were a dark-skinned people, a dark-skinned Native American people, there were people that thought, well, he doesn't look like Sitting Bull, so therefore he's not a real Indian.
Oh, my God.
There were other people that thought, I'll be damned if I'm going to have these dark-skinned people come into such economic development opportunities.
Unbelievable.
There was that thought.
Unbelievable.
The congressional delegation went along with that thinking. And I'm going to say also, quite frankly, nobody ever wants to mention it, but I'll mention it. It also came down to competition and competitive advantage. And I'm sure that our cousins, the Mashantuckets, did not want to see a third casino built right next door to them with Mohegan on the other side. And I will tell you that neither would have been excited about having a third casino in their backyard. Is this documented about the competitive advantage that Mashantucket and Mohegan didn't want us to have?
Yeah.
Probably quietly, but I knew because of my position just who was lobbying against us in Washington. And it was the congressional delegation. It was Joe Lieberman. It was Chris Dodd. It was our current senator. He was Attorney General at the time. Richard Blumenthal, against us. Jody Rell was the governor. She was against us. Her predecessor, she was a lieutenant governor who took over the governorship. Her predecessor was John Rowland. He was the governor. He was in favor of the third casino and pulled me aside and said, Larry, get your tribe recognized and I will ink, a compact with you. And then you can do what you're going to do. And it wasn't decided definitively that we were going to build a casino. And my argument was, if you want to negotiate the kind of economic development we do, then we can do that. But don't take away the legitimacy of a people.
Yeah.
Don't take away the historic legitimacy of a culture just because you're afraid of what we might do as a sovereign nation.
It seems like everyone's caught up on the whole casino thing when all you guys want to do is just be recognized.
That's exactly right. And there are things we could have done to support those two casinos. We could have opened laundry services and restaurants and whatever it might have been. But that didn't happen. It was reversed. And it was George W. Bush that reversed it. George W. Bush directed Gail North, who was Gail North, I think. She was the Secretary of the Interior at the time. And look that up.
Fact check, I got you.
Fact check that. It was either North or Norton, Gail Norton.
So how long were you recognized for before it got reversed?
A year and a half, maybe.
United States Secretary
She would have been Secretary of the Interior.
The Interior, Gail Norton. Norton.
Yeah. There is a Gail North. I forgot who she is and what she does. But they did that.
That's crazy.
And it was very disenchanting.
Yeah. I can
And today
imagine.
the tribe is out of money, and we're back at the starting blocks. And frankly, nobody cares. I started to say that John Rowland, who was the governor when I first went into my capacity at the tribe, he favored us. But then, unfortunately, through kickbacks and whatever and dirty dealings, he ended up going to jail.
Jeez.
And so that's when his lieutenant governor took over, and she was against us. It's a bitter story, and I have rarely told it all in full. But this is so many years later now that.
I mean, I think it's a story people need to hear.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, and that's why I'm talking about it, because we're seeing it at the border now. We're seeing it in the what I'm going to call Donald Trump's initiative to whiten American society. You know, and you wonder where we're going to go with all of this.
Yeah.
You know?
So, do you think that all this background and all of your experiences in life, do you think that kind of helped inspire, the purpose of the Wilson organization and what you do?
The Wilson organization started as a leadership development organization.
Yeah.
And I started it while I was on the president's staff at Rhode Island College.
Mm-hmm.
In an unofficial way, but many of the folks in my network, or I shouldn't say many, but several of the folks in my network, at the time, were folks that followed me once I decided to go out on my own. And I went out on my own when the leadership of Rhode Island College changed from Nancy Cariolo to Frank Sanchez. Yeah. But Nancy had asked me to come there. I had been doing a little bit of adjunct teaching, but she wanted me to write a curriculum for leadership, for gifted students who could be future Rhode Island leaders. And in order to get into I taught the class once a year, wrote the curriculum, taught the class once a year, and in order to get into the class, you had to be recommended by a faculty member, and it was campus wide. It could be graduate students, it could be undergraduate students, but they would all be gifted students. And so I did that. And I taught 4 years of classes, and 3 of my former students from various classes have worked for me part-time in this organization. And of course, I network with other organizations and whatnot to get the job done. But we essentially started as a leadership training organization. The jobs that I had prepared me, I think, to be a good leader. I'd like to think that I'm a good leader. It's up to you guys and your audience to decide whether or not that is true.
Do you think he's a good leader?
I think so.
I think so.
But leadership, thank you. But leadership, that's what the card says, yes. But to be a good leader, you have to have values.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have integrity.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to have a certain amount of credibility and confidence in terms of what you do, what you say, what you believe. And when I say a certain amount, it's not to say that you're going to be, all things to all people. Mm-hmm. We continue to work on our value systems. We continue to work on how we can make ourselves better people. But as I do that for myself, I like to think that it rubs off on some of the people around me.
Yeah.
So we get asked by companies, for example, to come in and help their somewhat dysfunctional teams become more effective, become more productive, to be less adverse to change. Those kinds of things.
Change is huge.
That's right.
I think people hate change.
People hate change.
And change can happen all the time.
It has to happen all the time.
Yeah.
That's what growth is all about.
Yeah.
But so it has to be managed. And it's managed through credibility. It's managed through authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
Now, I firmly believe that the best leaders are people who have experienced joy, but have also experienced sorrow and are not afraid to talk about it. You know?
Yeah.
They're people who are able to find gratitude and joy and fulfillment in every day of their lives. All they have to do is look for it. You know who taught me that? My mother taught me that. She died just a year ago at 101.
Yeah.
You
Crazy.
know? But she left me with those. If it was my father that told me to take care of my body and to come and help the Indians, my mother said you can find joy in every day, and you can find reasons to be grateful. And you know what's a great tool to use in terms of managing change, a great tool to use in terms of leadership, storytelling. Why is storytelling? I'm going to sound like a teacher. Why is storytelling effective?
Because it invokes emotion.
It evokes emotion,
That's for sure.
but stories also contain elements that guarantee someone can relate to some part of it. All right? So if you can relate to a little bit of what I'm saying, do you know what that does to you? It disarms you a bit. It makes you a bit more receptive to the change that may be coming. It makes you a bit more receptive to the idea that, gee, maybe Larry Wilson isn't so bad. You know? I used to stand in front of my classes, and I stand in front of leading workshops today. And I bare my soul about experiences that I've had, tragic experiences. I'm an identical twin. I know you're probably both sitting there thinking, wow, there was once two of you.
Crazy.
You know? The fact of the matter is I'm an identical twin. Once a twin, always a twin. But I lost my twin in a drowning accident when we were 16 years old. Well, I had to live through that. And I've had to manage that all through the years. But in sharing that with people in a workshop or sharing that with people in a class, when they don't expect it,
Yeah.
it disarms them, and now all of a sudden they start sharing. Now all of a sudden, two people that perhaps didn't get along all that well know something about each other and respect something about each other that wasn't there before. So now dialogue starts,
Yeah.
right? And the whole thing, and now change can start to happen and can start to be managed. That's how we started. We started in leadership. It all starts with storytelling. And that's exactly what happened with one of the early clients I got soon after leaving Rhode Island College. This man was president of an entity, and he had some anger management issues. And he had been used to doing his job in a certain way and leading in a certain way until it was determined that it was no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
And he and I began to talk. Now, when he first met me, he was very guarded.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time we got to the second session, he was skeptical. He was not really into this whole thing that he was being made to do.
Yeah, right.
But by the time we got to the second session, barriers were starting to melt away.
Can you sense that too? You can
Yes.
see that coming down?
Yes. And we actually worked together for a substantial amount of time, and he made great progress. And he's a great guy. And you know, so when people say to me, well, what is it about your company that makes you feel good? It makes me feel good when the people I'm trying to help feel good.
Yeah.
It's all about, the Wilson Organization is all about trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
When we get a call, you know, people tend to be very general about what's going on or what's not going on, whether it's a dysfunction in a team, anger management in an individual, you know, lack of diversity, whatever it may be. They just say, well, we have some management challenges, or we have some corporate culture challenges.
They kind of dance around it.
Yeah. But it always comes down to the same kinds of things, you know, the same kinds of issues. Now, I love to see corporate culture challenges that result from growing pains. If I can help a company grow, you know, and do away with the challenges that they're getting in the way of growth, that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
But sadly, more often, companies are in pain when there's bad behavior,
Yeah.
maybe even inappropriate behavior, when there's a lack of diversity, when there's a lack of understanding, when there's a lack of tolerance,
Yeah.
When there's bias, and so many of us, there's two kinds of bias: conscious bias and unconscious bias. We all want to kind of hide behind unconscious bias, but the reality is, people that are biased, many times, more often than they want to give credit to, are conscious of their bias.
Sure.
And that's why it's allowed to live. And we go into organizations like that and try to be helpful. And we are helpful.
Yeah.
But we're helpful in an authentic way. Sometimes people have to hear what they don't want to hear. Sometimes they find that they're not ready to make the changes that they need to make. I had a client who we were working on some diversity issues. And once I got there and defined, over a few weeks, we were able to define what some of his issues were that lacked diversity, where the problems were, what the solutions might have to entail and whatnot. And I don't know this, but I do think that since he decided to sort of put the project on hold for a while, it just tells me that perhaps he wasn't ready to make some of the more telling kinds of decisions. This particular issue that dealt with diversity, and I think most of our diversity clients, we handle that way. We handle in distinct phases. Now, in terms of executive coaching, that tends to be a relationship that has a beginning and it continues to run with the understanding that if we reach a comfortable stopping point, then we'll stop. If we decide to continue on, and we may decide to continue on for several months, you see? It depends upon the nature of the beast.
Everything's unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy or gal that understands diversity is the person who's been confronted with it all of his life, And the person, and in terms of leadership, the person who can boast success in training future leaders is the person that's written curricula, and is a person who takes his life experience and adds that to the mix in terms of leadership, diversity, and executive coaching. And that is exactly what I do. And I've done it for 43 years, Now, what fuels a business today and fuels the reason to go into business for yourself is a powerful vision, that reflects your passion, makes you feel good about yourself, is important to you and ideally important to the people around you and the people who you're reaching out to.
Yeah.
Those are the reasons to go in your own business, to make a difference and to do it with a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of joy, a certain amount of frustration, and an awful lot of gratitude for the opportunity. And I appreciate this opportunity with the two of you. Thanks very much.
That was a great way to end it right there, Larry.
That was great.
Appreciate you coming in, Larry. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
I am too.
Yeah, it's been a good friendship between all of us. I'm glad that we met. It was a year, a little bit over a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and it's a growing friendship.
Yeah.
It's
funny because I'm the type of person where I sit and just kind of do my work, sit at my desk and head at the computer. And Larry would come in and talk. And at first I was like, what the hell is this guy? And then you get to talk and it's like, you're so easy to talk to. And
He's a decent guy.
Yeah, and you give good advice.
All right, guys.
You're decent.
You're gonna,
Larry, so I'm going to guess here. People can learn more about you on your website.
WilsonOrganization.com.
Yeah, and you're also on LinkedIn.
They can find me on LinkedIn, and websites being what they are, they can tend to date themselves after a little bit. The LinkedIn tends to be, pretty flush and pretty current.
Good.
You kill
Good.
it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks again, Larry.
Thank you.
All right, for all the listeners out there, we'd love to hear some feedback. Let us know what you think. Check out Larry's content on LinkedIn. As always, follow us on Instagram at UpInYourBizPod. Subscribe to the podcast. Pass it along to your friends. Hope you guys enjoy it, and stay tuned for the next one.